Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 259, Assessing Your Emotional Honesty. Are you true to yourself? Well, welcome back as we finish out this month all about showing up, confronting hard things, and becoming more authentic. I think these are really big topics when it comes to thinking about your self-confidence and having healthy relationships. We've been talking about different things that we can avoid and why avoidance shows up for us in our life and how it can really get in the way of the life we want to have. And so I don't think we can complete the story about avoidance without talking about emotional honesty. It is a topic I have brought up plenty of times here on the show. It is one I will continue to visit because I think we need to keep thinking about it and keep talking about it. It's one of those insidious things, like a client said the other day. She said, "It's so invisible, Mary, that I didn't even know I was doing it." Okay, and that's why we got to keep talking about it. Mainly because we don't want to think of ourselves this way, so therefore the resistance can be high, and therefore the denial can be there. But before we get into that, if you want to take this work deeper, make sure you go to the show notes and check out the range of courses that I offer. The first one is a free ebook on healthy boundaries, and then the next one is a 3-part masterclass that you can really dive into how you lost your voice and how to get it back. And if you want something more comprehensive and something that will definitely make a big impact on your life, check out my Find Your Voice course. That is an online immersive experience that takes you about 6 months to complete, and there's online group coaching and one-on-one support from me. It's great stuff. It's really helping people change and grow. So make sure you check those out. If you have any questions, reach out to me, message me, email me, find me on social. I'm always here to help you out. So let's get back into what is emotional honesty and why do I think it's so important. I think it's the practice of being truthful about what you really feel, what you really think, and what you really need. It means recognizing and expressing your emotions authentically, rather than stuffing them or hiding them because you want to avoid conflict, judgment, or discomfort. Being emotionally honest means owning your emotions and not putting them on other people. And what I mean by that is communicating them clearly and respectfully. This is so essential if we want to have genuine relationships, if we want to have any personal growth in our life, and if we want to maintain our mental and emotional well-being. When we embrace being emotionally honest, we obviously can have deeper connections, have greater self-awareness, and I think better self-confidence. You feel a lot less anxious and more grounded. So I want to revisit here, because we've talked about it before on the show, what does emotional dishonesty really look like? And again, when you're listening to these things, I want you to think about how honest are you with yourself? And also those around you in your life, can you see any of this stuff? Because it is important to know if we have people in our life who are also doing it. So the obvious one is hiding our true feelings. We do this because we want to avoid conflict and judgment, and it's a very common behavior to do to protect ourselves. And while this might offer short-term relief, you know what happens, because if you look back over your life, you can see it. It often leads to long-term emotional distress for us. It really hurts our relationships in the end. Eventually, something's going to give or something's going to blow up. And the thing is, we never get to the underlying issues. I don't think we can truly resolve things in a relationship without emotional honesty and vulnerability. I just don't. And one of the biggest reasons why we stuff our feelings is to avoid conflict. It's an emotional trauma response. because conflict can be really uncomfortable and intimidating, and for some people, traumatic. It can lead to a lot of anxiety and stress. And so when we anticipate that expressing our true feelings might lead to an argument or disagreement or rejection, we're probably going to stay silent or say something that we don't mean or couch something in a way where we're not being as direct. Hence, passive-aggressive behavior. That's how it gets started. And this obviously comes from past experiences where you had negative outcomes. There's the big fear of judgment. We worry that other people might not accept or understand our feelings. Maybe they're going to criticize us, reject us, or ridicule us. Maybe that's happened in the past. And so to protect ourselves from potential harm, we're going to put on this facade of contentment, neutrality, go with the flow, even when we feel differently inside. And in fact, when I sit with clients and they're adamant about how easygoing they are, I think it's masking avoidance that they're afraid to look at. Sometimes, social and cultural conditioning can impact us as well. A lot of cultures value a sense of stoicism and discourage us from openly displaying our emotions, especially the negative ones. From a young age, maybe we were taught to keep it together and not show weakness. It makes me think of the term toxic positivity, too, where everything's great, everything's fabulous, everything's beautiful. Another reason why we do it is because we're trying to maintain harmony in our relationships. So we're going to avoid expressing how we really feel because we don't want to upset others. We don't want to cause tension. Maybe we have a really distorted sense of guilt, that unearned guilt that we've talked about. Lack of boundaries, I think, can really play into this. Because in our close relationships, we're going to prioritize the feelings and needs of our loved ones oftentimes over our own. And while this might seem like a noble sacrifice, you know what I'm going to say, it's going to lead to resentment and emotional exhaustion over time. Something's going to give. You are stacking dynamite. Those unspoken emotions and your unmet needs that aren't being expressed start to accumulate. It creates a distance, it creates anger, it creates disempowerment, creates a lot of things. So there's going to be frustration and bitterness building up over time. We're going to have more conflict with them. And this is all an illusion of control. Suppressing our feelings can give us a false sense of control, because by hiding our true feelings, we think we can manage how others perceive us and how they react. Now, a lot of times this is not conscious. I want you to think of, even if you don't have awareness that you're doing this, you might still be doing it. This control is an illusion because it really prevents authentic connections, and it leads to that awful disconnect I mentioned a few moments ago. We disconnect from ourselves, and therefore we can't be truly connected to others. We have to connect to ourselves first. We're so afraid of the vulnerability, where showing our true feelings might make us appear weak or exposed, where expressing how we really feel might lead to conflict or rejection, and we're worried about not being okay and not belonging. We're trying to keep things under control. Remember, control is the opposite of boundaries. Control is trying to manage things outside of ourselves, including people's reactions and perceptions of us and their behavior, versus going within and expressing what's going on the inside appropriately and then letting go. That's hard. It's hard when you have created these coping mechanisms to survive. And a big one that we need to talk about is people pleasing, which we've talked about here before on the show. Agreeing with others, avoiding expressing your true opinions is emotionally dishonest. It comes from that desire to maintain harmony, to avoid conflict, to feel needed, to be loved, to have approval. It has a lot of negative consequences. When we are constantly agreeing with other people or hiding our true opinions, there's that fear. We worry that expressing a dissenting view is going to lead to an argument, disapproval, social exclusion. And what's happening is we're afraid that they are going to have some kind of power over us, that we can't take care of ourselves. Because when you're a little kid and your big sister bullies you, or the kids in school laugh at you when you read out loud in class, or when a teacher mocks you or a parent shames you, that gets imprinted. And those are the feelings, that shame and humiliation, that's what comes up today. You're afraid that that's going to happen again. It's not your fault. That's your brain saying, oh, there's a hot stove. Don't want to touch that again. We think that if we have the other person's approval or the group's approval, that we're going to be okay. If we're liked and accepted by others, we'll be okay. Everything will be safe. So we learn how to mold our responses to fit what we believe others want to hear. This behavior is so common in relationships where we feel insecure. And we value the other person's opinion so highly. We're looking outside of ourselves to them to feel okay. And we're doing it at the expense of our own authenticity and our own vulnerability, which, sidebar, leads to more depression, more anxiety, more issues within ourselves because we're not being in touch with who we really are. This erodes our self-esteem and our sense of identity. We're so busy conforming, we've lost who we are, and that will implode. The other way that we can do this, and this is a little sneakier, so I want to talk about it, is we might behave differently in various situations or with different people. And that is a sign of emotional dishonesty. Now, before we get into that, I'm not talking about being appropriate, like you don't tell everything at work. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about picking and choosing what you tell people or how you come across. When you're not giving the appropriate people, like your best friend, your counselor, your partner, your healthy sister, the whole skinny. You're not giving them the whole thing. Because emotional honesty means being true to our feelings, our thoughts, and our needs, regardless of the situation or the people who we are with. When we find ourselves behaving differently in various situations with different people, it's not good. This inconsistency can often stem from a desire to fit in, to avoid conflict, or gain approval. And one of the biggest reasons is fear of judgment. So we may act one way with our friends, another way with family, and yet another way at work to avoid being judged or criticized. This can lead us to suppress our true feelings and adopt behaviors that we believe are more acceptable to others, but may not be really genuine for us. And this can be, number one, exhausting, right? Because you have 3 people going on there. That can take a lot of energy. And it creates a lot of internal conflict. We lose touch with ourselves again. And we don't trust ourselves. We're so worried about fitting in. Maybe being accepted by different social groups where we might alter our opinions, our interests, or even our personality traits to match those of the people around us. And again, you might not even be aware that you're doing this because you probably learned how to do this a long time ago, slowly over time, to the extent where you didn't even see it happening. And remember, true belonging comes from being accepted for who we really are, not a version of ourselves we have crafted to fit in. So you might not express how you really feel in a group of people because you're afraid, well, they're not going to go with that. I'm going to be the only one. I can't do that. I won't be allowed in this group anymore. We do it to avoid conflict. We want to keep the peace. So, for example, we might agree with a colleague's opinion at work to avoid an argument, even if we strongly disagree. This is a case-by-case basis, but if we're doing that all the time, that's a problem. And we're seeking approval. We might act in ways that we believe will earn praise and acceptance, even if those actions don't align with our true values and feelings. And this can become a habit, so it really makes it difficult to express our genuine emotions and needs. So we're looking for that external validation. So here are some of the negative consequences of compartmentalizing ourselves. The biggest one is loss of authenticity, because when we're constantly changing our behavior to suit other people, we become disconnected from our own true feelings and values. And it really makes it challenging to know who we are, to know what we really think and feel, and to feel grounded in that, and to trust ourselves and to believe in ourselves. A lot of times it means giving up what we value And that can be pretty scary when you think about your integrity and how you view yourself. Because what a lot of people have shared with me over the years is that, on one hand, they are afraid to give up that coping mechanism of fitting in and being nice and all those things. On the other hand, they really have a lot of shame come up because they don't like themselves. Not really. Now, they often stay so busy that there's no time to sit with self and admit to self, look, what am I doing? That wasn't what I really felt, and I told her something different than what I needed. But when it does come up, and we do recognize, we can't feel good about that. There's a lot of emotional exhaustion that I mentioned. Maintaining different personas for different situations is exhausting. It requires constant effort to remember how to act and what to say. Talk about burnout and stress. And the thing is that we don't get the fact that we're not helping trust in these relationships because other people are going to have a hard time really trusting or understanding us. Because those things are built on honesty and transparency. And they're not there when we're being emotionally dishonest. We are lying to other people. We're not being honest with ourselves and we're not being honest with them. Because if we were, we would probably think that we couldn't handle the anxiety of what might happen if we were honest. Now, eventually, what happens, I think, typically in adulthood, is this all starts to come to the fore when people aren't happy. And they have to come to realize that they're not happy because they haven't been honest with themselves and with those around them. They might be staying in a job that they hate, in a partnership that isn't healthy for them, maybe a friend group or a family of origin where they don't feel like they can be themselves. So it will catch up with you eventually. You may not realize at first that it is this identity stuff. Usually we don't. Usually we think it's something else or someone else. Then we realize it's ourselves, not being honest. In order to start doing that, we want to get things straight with ourselves. Now, we want to do this a little bit at a time with enough self-compassion and love, with enough understanding of why we might do some of these things, that we're not awful, shameful people, but instead we did this because we didn't feel safe. And as we become stronger, when we get a few healthier people around us, I think that is when we can start taking a deeper look. You're not going to look deeply if you're not ready. And that's okay. You just keep telling yourself, I want to be ready someday. I know I need to look at this shit, but I'm not ready to. And that's okay. Even just saying that to yourself is very empowering, and it really speaks to taking ownership. So let's talk about doing a little bit of that right now. Let's talk about looking within with some deep, real honesty. You know, the kind where we don't leave any pieces of the truth out. The ones that might make us look bad. Instead, we want to take a hard look because remember, ironically, all that avoidance of the guilt and shame, all of what we're afraid to feel, and all of what makes us show compartmentalized parts to ourselves creates more guilt and shame, not less. So it creates such a conundrum that we have to step out of. So let's do a little bit of that right now. So if you're in a space where you can sit and write down your answers, that's wonderful. But if right now you're busy, you're walking, you're driving, you're doing something, you're not in a private space, that's okay. I just want you to notice what comes up like immediately before you edit it. We can do that for lots of reasons, and we can edit before we realize we're editing. Don't shame yourself for editing, just try not to. Just bring some loving acceptance to whatever thoughts and feelings come up, and know that a little fear and shame coming up is normal, it's okay. So here are some questions and some things I want you to ask yourself. And again, just trust whatever answers come. And if you want to do more with this, you can take it somewhere safe. But for now, let's just notice what comes up. All right, you ready? The first one is, do I often say I'm fine when I'm really not? Do I often say I'm fine when I'm really not? Do I avoid discussing my true feelings just to keep the peace? When I get the vibe, it's not going to go over well? Does it make me agree with others when I disagree internally? Or maybe I'm so disconnected from myself that my stomach starts to twist and I'm not sure why. Am I afraid to express what I really need or what I really desire for fear of reprisal or ridicule or invalidation or gaslighting or whatever? Now I want you to think about a recent situation where maybe you hid your true feelings. What do you think you were afraid of at that time? What about another time where maybe you felt pressured to agree with someone, and how did that make you feel? Whether it was your boss or a colleague or your parent or your partner or your neighbor. So these are just some questions to ask yourself, and it can also be helpful to, and we all start after the fact, to kind of look back over your day and with compassion and just neutral observation, wow, I didn't really tell her how I really felt. Or when my partner said that saying, I agreed, and that's not really what I want to do. Or when someone asked if I need anything, I said, no, I'm great, I'm fine. Or I was going to bring up that topic tonight and I didn't want to do that. Or I didn't feel brave enough to do that. Just noticing. Again, the more you notice, the more you get out of this fight or flight or freeze response, or fawn, and the more you get into your thinking brain. And the more confidence in self-belief that you build, and the more you get that straight, the more compelled you will feel to share with others. So work on your self-awareness. Try to do some regular self-reflection and mindfulness practices, just noticing. I want you to think also about who do you want to be? How do you want others to experience you versus kind of what you're doing now? And how and why you don't want that. Get into your why. I tell you that all the time for good reason. Get into your why. Don't get into the how yet. Don't get into beating yourself up for not being able to do it. That's all going to take care of itself. What matters more is who do you want to be? In other words, maybe you say, I want to be a person who can be genuine. I want to be me with whoever comes up to me. I want to be a safe person to come to. I want to have the balls to be vulnerable because I want to make it safe for them to be vulnerable. Like figure out your why or your set of whys. That's going to be your driver. And once you get really solid with that, that's also going to be your motivation. The second thing is work on your boundaries. I don't think we can feel glued together or safe enough to be more honest until we have some boundaries for ourselves. I just firmly believe that. We need to know and understand what belongs to us and what doesn't, what our rights are, where we end and others begin. Like literally, we need that membrane around ourselves. And we also need to work on our control issues where we're not invading other people's membranes, if you know what I mean. We're not telling what to think and feel. We're not telling them what to need. We're not focusing on them anymore. We're focusing on telling them what we need after we tell ourselves. So then we also want to practice vulnerability a little bit at a time. Start with really small steps, like sharing a minor fear or concern with a trusted friend. First, see how you feel doing that. You might have a lot of anxiety come up and a lot of relief afterwards. But also notice what you receive in return because this is going to be valuable knowledge. I mean, hopefully you're getting some understanding, some empathy, maybe some encouragement. Hopefully you're not getting someone who tries to fix your feelings and rescue you or invalidate you. Gradually work towards expressing deeper emotions and thoughts. At first, in your own head and heart. Just doing that for a while is going to be helpful. Maybe journaling. Maybe speaking them in your car out loud where there's no one there. It helps you get used to hearing your voice say those things out loud. And writing them down puts them out there and makes them real. I want you, when you're practicing in your heart and your head, make sure you're doing I statements, because at first you're probably going to start with they. They won't respect me. They won't give me what I need. I can't believe they. And then pull it back to self and say, I really need some time off from work. I really need a break. I really need a raise. I want to go work out. I don't want to go on vacation with those people. It can feel overwhelmingly vulnerable to do that at first, and that's okay, and you're not crazy, and you're not the only one. Of course it does. Think about it. You've spent how many years avoiding this? Keep your stuff about you, your thoughts, your feelings, your choices, your needs, and work on detaching from other people's stuff, from their choices. And you can't do this alone. You have to have a couple safe people in your life to work on this. And I mean that. You hear me say that all the time, and I say it because it's true. And then when I see, like in the course now where we have a great coaching group, where we have a great group of people in the coaching, I watch them help each other grow. And I don't think they would be making these huge changes in their life without each other. I just don't believe that. We need to feel safe, and we need to feel heard, and we need to feel loved, at least by a couple people, in order to feel strong enough to go out in the world and to dare being ourselves. So I want you to think about, do you struggle with any of this stuff that we talked about today? And if you do, it's not your fault. And you can so change it. That's the wonderful thing. Just start working within, and then start putting your insides out there. So today we looked at the concept of emotional honesty and what I think is a profound impact it has on our lives and our relationships. It means being truthful about our feelings, our thoughts, and our needs, regardless of what could happen if we do that. We looked at some of the common reasons why we may struggle with emotional honesty, like fear of conflict and judgment, and being vulnerable, and how oftentimes these are trauma responses. So these fears can often lead to behaviors like agreeing with people too much or stuffing our feelings or opinions. Then we talked about strategies for recognizing and working with our emotional dishonesty, getting real with ourselves, finding safe people, and setting boundaries. And then little by little, working on becoming braver, a little bit at a time, of putting our real truth out there. Thank you so much for joining me today. I promise you, the more you work on this, the better you're going to feel and the better relationships you're going to have. Make sure you check the show notes for the courses that I offer and join our Facebook group. The link is right there. It's private. It's safe. I do live sessions every Wednesday evening there. They're a half an hour long on topics similar to what we're talking about today, and anything else you want to get into about finding your voice again, because you deserve to be heard. All right, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.